Welcome to ILTV's Weekly Insider. I'm Lidar Gavelazi. A 7-day operational pause came to an abrupt end when Hamas broke the ceasefire agreement. During this time, Israel was able to secure the release of around 110 hostages, while 137 are still being held captive in Gaza. And now the IDF has resumed its operations while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recalled the head of the Mossad from Qatar, effectively ending negotiations. As such, IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari has said the IDF was extending its ground offensive against Hamas to include all of the Gaza Strip. The resumption of hostilities was met, of course, with international pressure, including by the United States, which has publicly called on Israel to ensure the safeguarding of Palestinian civilians and more humanitarian aid into Gaza. And there are reports that Israel is still being pressured behind the scenes to make a deal for another ceasefire. Well, joining us now via Zoom from Jerusalem is the former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Ari Hero, and Ruth Vassal-Melande, a Middle East foreign policy expert and former member of Knesset. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Lida.
So, Ruth, let's start with you. The operational pause has come to an end. Israel's had to make some difficult choices, an end to the negotiations and the ceasefire, and now a massive offensive against Hamas. What is the IDF strategy now?
It's very clear. The IDF has declared from the beginning that it has two main objectives. One is to release all of our hostages and bring them home. And second of all, to destroy the capability and the major leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization in order to prevent anything like the October 7th events from happening again. So this is the strategy. It remains the strategy. There was a tactical pause given the mediator's ability to convince the terrorist organization to release some of the hostages. The Hamas very cynically still holds 17 women, about 10 elderly, 2 babies, foreign nationals, and a huge number of men, which is unacceptable by any international law or any humanitarian standard. And the IDF has the strategy of bringing those people held there back, and again, preventing this kind of attack from happening again.
Now, Ari, throughout this entire operational pause, Hamas, as Ruth mentioned, released 110 hostages, mainly elderly women and children. And Israelis are, of course, overjoyed that they've returned. But it seems that Hamas was controlling the flow, playing psychological warfare games with Israelis and deciding who to release and when. It would send a list to Israel in the morning, and that would be that. One of the families even called this, Schindler's List. So was this a good deal for Israel? Does Hamas still hold the upper hand, considering it still holds over 130 hostages?
I think that the temporary ceasefire highlighted two very important factors that we have to keep in mind throughout this process. Number one, and this is something that the mother of Ben Zusman, who was killed in Gaza just a couple of days ago, repeated in her eulogy for her son yesterday. And that is that we love life and they love death. And we will do whatever it takes to bring our people home on the one hand, and in parallel, we will do whatever it takes to destroy the monsters on the other side of the border. And I think that any temporary ceasefire is really just accentuates that deep principle that we have as Israelis and as Jewish people. And the second is that our goals, as the former Knesset member just mentioned, and that is that we will not stop until Hamas is destroyed. Temporary ceasefire that ultimately aid our goal in bringing back hostages are very much a part of the overall strategy, and therefore it's not something to look down on, but rather it's part of what we're trying to accomplish here.
So you both agree, and as Israeli officials have been repeating from day one, that the end goal here is to eliminate Hamas and also to bring the hostages back home. So Ruth, what is going on now with the negotiations after this pause? Is Israel still trying to reach some sort of deal with Hamas? And I also want to address the statement made by Secretary of State spokesman Matthew Miller that the reason that the negotiations fell through is that Hamas refused to release the rest of the female hostages because it doesn't want them revealing what they've been through in captivity. And of course, we can only imagine what that means.
So there are two parts to your question, basically. I think the first one pertains to the honesty of the terrorist organization with which we are dealing inadvertently via Qatar, via the Egyptians, etc. As I said before, this was a tactical move to optimize every opportunity that the Israeli government has to bring home hostages. The agreement encompassed all of the women and the children. The Hamas broke that. Whatever the reason for breaking that is completely irrelevant. They broke their word, which is not surprising on the one hand, but it ended the, let's say, tactical understanding rather than good faith or trust that the Israelis put in the process. And from that moment on, the overarching goal of returning the hostages in a different way, via force, that has proved itself useful in this case, and stopping the Hamas from ever perpetrating the heinous atrocities that were perpetrated there on October 7th again. This is what the IDF is doing right now. And this is the important thing to look at, because this is a no-choice war. This is not something that Israel chose to go into. There was not one Israeli soldier, I remind, not even one Israeli citizen in the Gaza Strip prior to the October 7th events. Moreover, there was not even one Jewish bone left in the Gaza Strip. The graves were actually dug out and they were reburied. People who had died previously, Jews in the Gaza Strip, were dug out of their graves and reburied in Israel. So there was no Jewish presence prior to the October 7th atrocities. And therefore, the IDF will go all the way to make sure that what had happened will never happen again. And this is the important thing to stress, and not why the Hamas is playing the games that it's playing. It's, in my humble opinion, giving too much platform, too much covering, and too much, let's say, significance to Hamas and to their leader.
Absolutely. And I want to pivot now to the United States and its role in this war. I was speaking recently with Steve Leibovitz, who usually hosts ILTV's Insider, and he reminded me that Henry Kissinger, who passed away just this week at the age of 100, only visited Israel once during the Yom Kippur War, and that was towards the end of the war. Contrast that with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who has already visited Israel 3 times. It seems the U.S. is exerting extreme pressure on Israel more than on Hamas or Iran. So Ari, as someone who's been very involved with past U.S. administrations, what is your take on this pressure from the United States? Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
Well, I think there's 2 points to keep in mind as you look at the U.S. role here. Firstly, and I think you have to look at the first number of weeks in this war after the horrific massacre of October 7th. The United States presence here was a sign of support, was a sign of force, was a sign of closeness with the state of Israel, with the leadership of Israel, and with Israel's stated goals. Israel made clear our reasoning for going to war, and the United States publicly, very publicly, including visits not only of the Secretary of State, but the President of the United States himself, in coming over and solidifying and supporting our stance. So I think that that was a very strong statement. While the war continues and the humanitarian questions echo louder from the international community, obviously we feel very, very strongly the state of Israel, and we know that we follow international law to a T. We are the most moral country and army in the world when it comes to protecting civilian populations in enemy territories. And therefore, I think ultimately the leadership of Israel, and this has happened in the past, must consider Israel's strategic goals and strategic statements more than what the United States or other countries seem to be saying, what you called pressure. I think ultimately it is our interests that dictate the day and not the statements of any international parties, as close and as friendly as they may be.
But you know, Israel's enemies are watching, and they're paying attention. And when the United States issues public statements about Palestinian civilians, and what it has made clear that it allows and that it doesn't allow Israel to do, I mean, what kind of message is this sending to Hamas or to Iran or to other countries in the region who actually are listening quite closely? Ruth, what do you think about that?
I think that the United States have supported Israel from the first second. I think that a big thank you and a huge gratitude is due. It's really unprecedented. The military presence, the loyalty and the friendship shown by President Biden, and it makes no difference to me whether it's Democratic or Republican, is very, very indicative of the value sharing between Israel and Israel and the United States. Very important to mention is the fact that if the United States is pressing Israel in the sense that it is asking to have less citizens or to take more measures to prevent citizens or civilians in the Gaza Strip from being hurt. This is something that is humane, understandable, and yet Israel and the United States has stated this over and over again, will make at the end of the day its own decisions. You need to also listen, and the world needs to also listen to the message between the lines. The United States is saying that despite the call not to hurt civilians, there is a very clear message that Israel is not targeting civilians. It's taking huge measures, very careful, very cautious, not to hurt civilians. And this is said by official statesmen and spokespeople in the United States administration. More and above that, it has been said by the United States that at the end of the day, Israel will make its own decisions. The United States cannot make the decisions for Israel because Israel needs to live side by side with the entity called Gaza. And having a Hamas or anything similar to Hamas stay on the other side simply means, and they've said this openly in Arabic again and again on interviews, they're open about it, shameless about it, that they will do it again and again. If they're left there, they will do it again and again. Women will be savagely raped. Babies will be beheaded. Men will be, I don't even want to say the word because it's horrific, and people will be murdered and massacred. We cannot allow ourselves to be left in that position. And therefore, with all the gratitude, and we do feel a huge level of gratitude to the friendship and the values that we share with the United States, Israel at the end of the day will make its own decisions, not out of choice, but because this is a life and death situation.
And, Ari, I do want to talk a minute about the issue of the civilians. This is, of course, a very important issue, and we see the images of destruction, the death toll rising from Gaza, and it's having an effect. It's having an effect on public opinion. And so my question is, will the pressure on Israel to reach some sort of ceasefire or bring some sort of end, to the war, will this pressure increase? Will we see this pressure increase from the United States? As we've seen happen in the past in every sort of round of conflict that Israel has had in the past with Hamas.
So the way to deflect this pressure, and I tied into your last question, Lidar, about the regional reaction to pressure from the United States, and is for us to win this war. Ultimately, if we stay on the path that we're on and we continue to march towards victory here. And victory, as Ruth said earlier in this interview, is destroying Hamas's terrorist capabilities and destroying their political infrastructure. If we accomplish that, then number one, the region will view Israel positively, no matter what happens along the way. We live in a region where only victory and only a strong Israel has a secure place. Our neighbors, our regional neighbors, and including the countries that reached peace agreements with us over the past few years, are standing by the side, waiting to see if we're going to win and if we're going to finish this the way they expect us to finish this. And that too answers the question about additional pressure. It is very possible that we will see greater rhetoric, louder voices calling for Israel to end the war and to pull out. But we as a nation and we as a people have a responsibility to ourselves. We have a responsibility to the victims of October 7th, and we have a responsibility for our children and the next generations that are going to have to live here and cannot live with that type of threat on the southern border. And ultimately, all the pressure in the world should not push us even an inch left or right when it comes to finishing this most critical and most important task.
I'd like to also reiterate something with your permission.
Go
My
ahead.
apologies. There is no left or right in this question. There's no political division. I remind those who don't remember or don't know that those massacred in the south of Israel were mostly belonging to the peace camp, to the left side of the Israeli political map. It makes absolutely no difference regarding the need, the wish, and the objective to eliminate that terrorist organization which seeks to eliminate Israel openly, unashamedly. And therefore, this is something that we need to do, and the leadership of the country needs to do, regardless of the pressures from the outside.
So, Ruth, this also begs the question, can Hamas really even be eliminated? It's an ideology. Bibi has compared Hamas to the Nazis and to ISIS or Al-Qaeda, who carried out 9/11. Can Israel truly defeat them?
Yes, I think it is possible. Militarily, approximately 95% of Hamas operatives and their capabilities can be destroyed. This is something that is being taken on by the IDF. However, if on the day after the entire educational system in the Gaza Strip, and by the way, in the West Bank as well, which also has the same educational system of incitement, indoctrination, and teaching of hatred, if this will not be eliminated and recreated with a whole new system of values being taught, of tolerance, of inclusion, etc., no matter how many Hamas operatives will be killed, this will be all in vain, and the extreme ideology will rise again. Therefore, it is first and foremost imperative to really destroy the Hamas operatives, their capabilities, their arms. But second of all, the educational system needs to be changed. Then the instigator and the mastermind of the entire macro plan, being Iran, needs to be tackled. But this is at a later stage.
Absolutely. Now, Ari, we're almost out of time, so I want to hear final thoughts from you. You know, there were many misconceptions or conceptions, that exploded on October 7th. From 2005, during disengagement and beyond, our leaders told us that leaving Gaza would ultimately make us more secure. And after the Hamas takeover and until October 7th, there was a policy of allowing Hamas to be paid off in return for quiet, mixed with, of course, occasional flare-ups and IDF operations. So which perceptions have changed for you after October 7th?
Well, I was one of those voices back in 2005 that very much opposed the disengagement. I think the concept of handing over land to an entity that you quote unquote hope will turn to peace with Israel, it was a terrible mistake. We saw it in Gaza even before October 7th, but obviously October 7th changed things drastically. And I think that there's a very important lesson to learn as far as what happens in Gaza the day after. One of the main thrusts, or one of the voices that you hear mostly from the United States, as far as instilling the Palestinian Authority into Gaza, would just be a repeat of that mistake. The Palestinian Authority has controlled areas in the West Bank for 20 years now, and they controlled Gaza at the beginning of the way as well. And we've seen them do absolutely nothing to curb terrorism. We've seen them do absolutely nothing to fight terrorism, and absolutely nothing to educate their population towards peace. And I think that if there's a lesson to learn from October 7th, and again, this is a lesson that we should have known beforehand, and that is that ultimately our security can only be dealt with by the state of Israel, and outsourcing it to others and hoping for the best is not an option in the Middle East. You cannot give away land with the hope that somebody else will do your duty for you. And this is something that we're going to have to internalize in our northern border and our eastern front moving forward, in addition to what we see in Gaza.
Absolutely an important lesson to be learned. And that's all the time we have today. Thank you to Ari Harrow and Ruth Vassel-Melande. I'm Lidar Gavelazi, and this was ILTV's Insider. For more latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thank you for our viewers for watching. Be safe, and shalom from Israel.